Hi everyone! Today I'll show you how I paint faces in acrylics. So when I'm painting a face, I usually start by finding a reference photo. It might be from a stock photo site or a photo I've taken myself. A free stock photo site I like to use is pexels.com. Then I use the grid method to sketch the face, and I'll link to another video on how to do this part if you want to try it. I then transfer the sketch onto my painting surface, which might be canvas, canvas board, watercolor paper or cardboard. There are many different ways to transfer a sketch, but I mostly use graphite transfer paper. You can also sketch directly onto the painting surface, but if you have to erase a lot while sketching, it might not be good for the paper or the canvas. Now let's get to the actual painting. I start with the skin and then continue with the eyes, eyebrows and mouth after the skin is done. For the skin tone, I use a warm red, yellow, browns and white, and add blue for the shadows. Most of the acrylic paints I use are Grelander paints from Lidl, and they don't state which pigments they use, so I can't be sure what they are, but comparing to my watercolors, the browns would be yellow ochre, burnt sienna, and especially for the darker skin tones, also amber. I don't have any formula on the amounts, I just add more yellows if the mix turns out too red, or add more white if it's too dark, and vice versa. It's better to mix a bigger amount of paint and store it in a pot you can close if you think you might continue the painting later or just need the same color mix for touch-ups. If I mix the mid-tone first, I can then add more white to make a different mix for the highlights and add blue or amber to make a different color mix for the shadows. Since acrylics dry fast, I find it hard to blend the darker and lighter skin tones together, and I often work in layers instead. Starting with covering the whole face in a mid-tone, I can then add layers of the darker mix for the shadows and the lighter mix for the highlights. I blend them outwards by first laying on the thick color with no water or only a little water on the brush, mostly just the paint. Then I rinse the brush in water or use a different brush and dip it in water to make it wet and blend out the edges while the paint is still wet until there's no sharp line or edge visible. Using too much water to blend out the skin tone might lead to the paint peeling off when it's dry. I've never had this happen, but if you have that problem, you might want to get a medium to achieve that same transparency to the paint that I've done with water here. Matte medium is transparent acrylic paint, so mixing that with the color will make it less opaque and let you blend out the color gradually without using water or using less water. As for where the shadows and highlights go, you can look at the reference photo or decide on a light source and let that determine where the light would hit and which areas would be left in the shadow. I might color in the eyelids here too, or leave them white if I plan on doing a heavy eye makeup look later on. Once I'm pretty happy with the skin tone, I start working on the eyes, eyebrows and lips or mouth in no particular order, going back and forth, and I might go over the skin again in the process too. I color in the iris with a flat color and the pupil in black, and then add highlights with an opaque white acrylic paint. I have a big bottle of white by Plus Color because I found I use white a lot. I actually used it a lot more for crafts, especially before I discovered gesso. But back to the eyes. I paint circular highlights and sometimes a white line on the pupil and the iris to make the eyes look more lively. I don't leave the whites of the eyes completely white, but usually add a transparent blue tone close to the eyelids, but this could be any other color that suits the color scheme of your painting. And of course I add pink in the corner of the eye. You might even add a bit of a white highlight in the corner of the eye. As for the eyebrows, I color them in with a lighter version of the tone I want them to be, and then add individual hairs over it with the darker tone and a small brush. I fill in the lips with a base color and add highlights and shadows on top. I often make the upper lip a bit darker since it's usually in the shadow unless the light is coming from underneath. I add a soft highlight in the middle of the lower lip and add darker lines or white lines on top of it, leaving the base color to show through and blending out the lines into the base color in the edges. I add shadows in the corners of the mouth and between and under the lips. I leave the eyelashes for last after the eyes and eye makeup are done and paint them on individually with the smallest brush I have, which is a size 1 round brush. To set the portrait in the background better, I might also add a few strokes of the background colors into the shadows or the highlights of the face and blend them out the same way I did with the skin tones to give the face a bit of a colored glow. And I also do the same thing with the blush on the cheeks. I'll link to the art supplies I use if you want to check them out, and I'm also planning on making a video about my acrylic painting supplies specifically, so I'll link to that once it's done. Both of these paintings are for previous YouTube Artist Collective themes, and you can check out the whole process videos if you'd like to know more about the paintings. I'll link them below or somewhere on the video. Thank you so much for watching and see you next week. I'm posting 2 videos a week at the moment, a real-time ASMR art video with relaxing drawing or art supply sounds on Tuesdays, and a speed painting or a small art tutorial like this one on Fridays. Bye!